Now, I have spoken to a number of bishops this week. Some are genuinely distressed by what they're seeing from President Biden, and others are at great pains over what to do about it. Does the Bishops' Conference have the authority to do anything at all? My next guest released a pastoral letter this past Saturday titled, "Before I Formed You in the Womb, I Knew You," a pastoral letter on the human dignity of the unborn, Holy Communion, and Catholics in public life. It focuses on the worthiness required for the reception of Holy Communion. Why release this letter now, and what does he hope to get from it? Here to discuss all of this and more is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Archbishop, thank you for being here. I want to start with the letter you released this weekend. In it, you write, "It is fundamentally a question of integrity. To receive the Blessed Sacrament in the Catholic liturgy is to espouse publicly the faith and moral teachings of the Catholic Church, and to desire to live accordingly. We all fall short in various ways, but there is a great difference between struggling to live according to the teachings of the Church and rejecting those teachings. Those who reject the teaching of the Church on the sanctity of human life, and those who do not seek to live in accordance with the teaching, should not receive the Eucharist." Why did you choose to write this pastoral letter now? And is there a message here for a particular member of your diocese? I'm thinking of Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
I would imagine a lot of people would think of her, but there are many Catholics in public life in this situation. She's more highly visible than most. But this is something that has been on my mind for a very long time. I know I could not remain silent on the issue. I knew I had to make some kind of public statement or action. And then I got the idea of writing a pastoral letter, a teaching. Really, this is a teaching document, because I realized for a long time that, for one thing, many Catholics don't understand anymore what it means to receive the Eucharist. So we need to do more catechesis on worthiness to receive Holy Communion. The bishops have been grappling with this for a very long time. In the early 2000s, we were debating it. We issued a document in 2006 on worthiness to receive communion, but didn't get into the Catholics in public life question. But that's sort of the basis for the question of when one should not receive Holy Communion. But also I knew we had to expose the horrendous evil of abortion, because our opponents in this debate do a great job at deflecting attention from the harsh evil that it really is. So that also had to needed to be exposed in an objective way. That's why I cite principles of science and then the law and so forth. The real question is someone in public life who supports abortion, is someone in a situation of mortal sin or not, or in a state of grace? And this gets into the question of cooperation with evil. So I had to have a chapter on that, the principles of cooperation. And finally, the last chapter, the special role of Catholics in public life and the added consideration of the scandal that it can cause. So it's been on my mind for a long time. And I was in the process of preparing this document all throughout last year, and intentionally waited until after the election to release it, because I did not want anyone to kind of hijack this for a political purpose, because this is not a political agenda.
There is an argument, Bishop or Archbishop, that I'm beginning to hear and read. Bishops accusing you and others of weaponizing the Eucharist. In February, Bishop Robert McElroy of San Diego had this to say on denying Biden and other political leaders communion. He said, "I do not see how depriving the president or other political leaders of the Eucharist based on their public policy stance can be interpreted in our society as anything other than the weaponization of the Eucharist." Are you weaponizing the Eucharist, Archbishop Cordileone?
Well, I would question who's weaponizing the Eucharist. We're trying to stick to Catholic teaching and principles. So if one is following church teaching and applying it versus someone who's dissenting from church teaching for a political purpose and still going to communion, I would question who's the one really weaponizing the Eucharist. It's certainly not my intention to do that. It's my intention to uphold church teaching, uphold the sanctity of life in the womb, and to safeguard the Eucharist. And there is precedent for it. I bring this out in the letter as well. There's precedent for, if we go back to the mid-20th century, the civil rights movement, the famous case of Archbishop Rummel in
right here in New Orleans.
Town of New Orleans, yes. actually excommunicating 3 public officials because of their opposition to his integration of the schools. You know, every generation has its preeminent issue. For our generation, it is abortion. That's why the bishops have called it the preeminent issue. In the mid-19th century, it was slavery. In the mid-20th century, it was a civil rights movement. It was faith leaders who were in the vanguard of the civil rights movement, many of them putting their lives at risk. Of course, the great martyr for that, Martin Luther King Jr., but others put their lives at risk for the sake of civil rights. And there's this cultural blindness that blinds people to the horrendous evil that's being done. That's what was happening in pre-civil rights South. That's what's happening now with the case of abortion. So I don't see this as just one policy position among many. We lobby for a lot of policy positions, as is our right and our duty even. But this is at a whole different level because it attacks the fundamental right of all, which is the right to life.
Archbishop, regarding public figures who are pro-choice, you write, you are in a position to do something concrete and decisive to stop the killing. Please stop pretending that advocating for or practicing a grave moral evil, one that snuffs out an innocent human life, one that denies a fundamental human right, is somehow compatible with the Catholic faith. It is not. So, Archbishop, will you ask your priest to deny communion to well-known office holders who persist in supporting abortion against church teaching?
As I also mentioned, these conversations have to take place, and that's where there's pastoral discretion has to be applied. And when the pastor in his situation has to make the decision if that's going to be fruitless, then take that action. So I'm still working on that.
Okay. It has been reported that during the annual Conference of Catholic Bishops in June, the U.S. bishops will vote on whether or not to create a document prepared by the USCCB Doctrinal Committee addressing whether those who hold public office and support abortion should receive communion. Now, this document is the result of a decision in November by USCCB President Jose Gomez to address President Biden's stance on abortion. Just to clarify for the audience, this is just a vote to work on a document. This seems like a slow walk to me, Archbishop Cordileone. Do you think 2/3 of the bishops, first of all, will agree for this to proceed? And why is it needed at this point? Isn't the teaching already established?
The teaching is already established, but we need to continue to promote that teaching and find means to communicate that teaching to our people. I'm sensing a growing frustration and concern on the part of bishops on this issue. Again, it's something bishops have been grappling with for a very long time. We're sensing more and more the urgency of it, and I sense kind of this growing momentum. Unfortunately, it's the kind of the reality of any large body or bureaucracy. The bylaws of the conference require that before a statement or a document is drafted, that the body has to approve that it should be written. And then when it is written, they have to approve the written document. So it is a bit cumbersome. It is a bit time consuming, but it's to respect the process of, because it's a document of the whole body, everyone should be able to weigh in on it. So that's why the length of time.
Yeah, in our previous segment, we spoke to Father Jerry Murray about the canonical considerations here. I mean, there are canons at play. So it seems the problem for the bishops is what action to take, not diagnosing the difficulty. We know what that is. How big a challenge do Biden and other Catholics in public life advocating things at odds with church teaching, how big a challenge do they present to the bishops in America and the Vatican, frankly? And what I mean by that is a threat to their authority to teach the faith definitively.
Yes, this gets into the whole question of scandal. If prominent Catholics are giving a counterexample and then they're leading people astray, thinking that somehow on a particular issue that denies a fundamental human rights, it's acceptable for a Catholic to do so. So it is this danger of scandal. Scandal is an action which can lead other people into error, and that is what is going on here. So it's very urgent. consideration.
Yeah, well, as we were talking earlier about also the scandal of disunity, because you have you clearly defining what the church teaches and what is required. Then you have other bishops who frankly don't believe it's necessary to in any way object or even have the conversation about reception of communion and worthiness of communion. We have cardinals in Washington and elsewhere saying, I'm not going to deny communion to anybody. I won't do it. Should the Vatican get involved here, and will it?
I don't know if the Vatican really needs to get involved. So what I tried to lay out in the pastoral letter is church teaching. So it's not something that there can be any argument over. So these are the principles. When it comes to applying these principles in a specific circumstance, that's where pastoral judgment is necessary. And there are differences of opinion among bishops, but I would hope all bishops accept the principle that someone in this situation should not receive communion. If they are receiving communion, then what to do about it. So there are actually two canons. There's also Canon 916, and that's the one that applies to the individual, that if they're in a state of serious sin, that they should not go to communion. Canon 915 is what if they do, and it's worded that they are not to be admitted to communion. So it's in the passive voice. So who does the not admitting? That would be the local bishop. And this is where it respects the authority of the local bishop in his diocese according to his own pastoral discretion.
I know that you understand this, and I mean, we've talked about this in the past, the crisis for Catholic teaching and authority. A recent Pew survey reveals that 7 in 10 Catholics do not think Catholic politicians who advocate abortion should be barred from Holy Communion. How do you respond to or explain that type of statistic?
They either don't understand what it means to receive communion, or they don't understand the grave evil of abortion. And that's why I knew I had to write this pastoral letter teaching on both of those principles. As I have a question and answer supporting document, where I speak about abortion is a specific action. It's not something that's sort of an attitude that can manifest itself in different ways. So racism, none of us disagree racism is an evil, and we need to continue to work to eradicate it. But racism is an attitude. It can express itself by a racial slur, or it can express itself by lynchings. I mean, we're horrified to think that lynchings were tolerated at one point in this country. That's horrific. So what would someone say about a Catholic politician who thinks it's okay to lynch people of a certain race, that it's okay for them to go to communion? Unless they don't understand what communion is. So they have to, first of all, recognize the brutal, deep evil of abortion, and they have to recognize what it means to receive communion worthily. If we recognize the reality of both of those, the truth of both of those, and put them together, then the answer is clear.
Yeah. In your letter, you write, the teaching of our faith is clear. Those who kill or assist in killing the child, even if personally opposed to abortion, those who pressure or encourage the mother to have an abortion, who pay for it, who provide financial assistance to organizations to provide abortions, or who support candidates or legislation for the purpose of making abortion a more readily available choice, are all cooperating with a very serious evil. Formal cooperation and immediate material cooperation in evil is never morally justified. Now, this past election, Catholics for Biden held several online events. Archbishop, I want to play this for you. This is Sister Simone Campbell. She had this to say about voting Catholics. I'd like your reaction.
Our whole theme is helping Catholics see that they're multi-issue voters. They need to be multi-issue voters to be in harmony with what Pope Francis teaches. Often we hear from Catholics who hear, either from the pulpit or from other teachers, that they can only vote on a single issue. That's not our faith. That's never been our faith. And in fact, the reversal of Roe v. Wade, or the outline of abortion, has never been our faith. What has been our faith all these years has been caring for the unborn.
Your reaction, Archbishop, is that our faith?
Certainly caring for the unborn is our faith, and that's why we do more than anyone else to help women in crisis pregnancies and help women and others affected by a particular abortion to heal. that is. And the Catholics are not single issue voters. That's why the bishops issue their document on forming conscience for faithful citizenship. But we do have to prioritize the issues and then weigh them in evaluating any particular candidate. I was very careful in the way I worded this because I said voting for a candidate for the purpose of promoting abortion. If that's your intention for voting for the candidate, then it's clear there's formal cooperation there. When it comes to weighing the issue, prioritizing and weighing the issues, then Catholics have to make that decision within their own conscience. But it seems to me there are a lot of people who vote the other way who are single issue voters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, thank you so much for being here. And the pastoral letter is a worthy read. You can find it at inthewomb.org. And you can follow Archbishop Cordileone at Arch Cordileone. Thank you so much for being here, Archbishop.
Thank you, Raymond.